Gentleman from Indiana for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Our job in the federal government is to protect taxpayer dollars and ensure that they are used responsibly and effectively. But President Biden seems to have lost sight of that fact. The fact that every single dollar that is spent by the government is a dollar that was taken from the American people through taxes. And it's less money that Americans get to use for a down payment on a house, to put food on their table, and sending their kids to college. The Biden administration's complete disregard for taxpayer dollars is illustrated in its never-ending plans to increase government spending with zero accountability. Today, I want to begin my focus on the government's staggering amount of improper payments. The Nonpartisan Government Accountability Office estimates that in 2021, fiscal year 21, the federal government made $247 billion of improper payments. If improper payments were its own line in the federal budget, it would be the sixth largest line behind Social Security, Medicare, National Defense, Medicaid, and interest on our debt. But it gets worse. The Government Accountability Office also states, and I quote, "This estimate is likely understated since it doesn't include improper payments related to COVID-19 funding." The Department of Labor's Inspector General estimates that improper payments for pandemic unemployment programs accounted for $191 billion. And outside experts estimate that it could be as high as $400 billion. I'm glad that the House is considering the Protecting Taxpayers and Victims of Unemployment Fraud Act, which incentivizes states to investigate and recover fraudulent unemployment insurance claims. My first question for Mrs. Gressler, regarding the reported amount found that 1 in 5 Medicaid payments were improper. A business would never survive if 1 in 5 checks sent out were in error. A family would never make it financially if 20% of the bills they paid were in error. How do improper payments of this size, how are they permitted to continue year after year?
There's no consequence for having those improper payments. They simply can continue to go on and to just collect the funding because it's an entitlement.
Do you think that the federal government has taken any meaningful steps to reform improper payments and hold our federal agencies accountable for the improper payments that take place?
No.
Why not, from your perspective?
There are some recommendations. They've largely gone ignored, but there is no accountability. What is their incentive to do that? The money will be there no matter what if they send the improper payments. And in some places, it's difficult to impose the consequences if it is an entitlement because you would be taking away from something that they have a legal authority to. But that's where I think we need to impose accountability on the states, especially in those programs that are administered through the states.
All right, thank you. Also, Ms. Gressler, there are dozens of instances where the federal government has duplicative programs and offices. In 2022 alone, the GAO identified 16 new instances of overlap between federal programs. Would you agree that duplicative federal programs are a clear illustrator that our bureaucracy, our federal bureaucracy, has gotten out of control?
Absolutely, and that's also a disservice to the individuals those programs are supposed to help because they don't know which door to walk into.
Yeah, and I want to just cite a few examples of some of these duplicative government programs that have just recently been uncovered. For example, there are 21 federal agencies that have programs related to the role of diet in Americans' risk of chronic health conditions. There are 5 federal agencies who research alternate technologies for radioactive materials. The Department of Interior has 3 separate systems that separately collect data on oil and gas development. There are 3 different programs at the Department of Justice that investigate law enforcement's use of force. And the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Treasury both have programs regarding trade-based money laundering. All of these are programs that should be funded, but at the same time, we shouldn't have so many duplicative programs and so many people in our federal government that are doing the same thing and doing the same job. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields.